Back in the early 1660s, a Newcastle labourer called Robert Phillipson found himself in trouble because of his knowledge of herbs. As a man who built roads, he got to know the wild plants, the bushes, the herbs that he'd come across. And building the roads to places like Morpeth, Hexham and Consett, he was never short of slowberries, blackberries, red currants, mushrooms, and a whole range of common country fare. However, a young girl called Josephine Marr was suffering a nasty rash on her lower body. She couldn't afford the potions that the local quack doctor was offering, so mentioned this to her priest at the church where Jesmond now stands. The priest told her that the only thing that could rid her of it was holy ointment. Now, this is a phrase that's covered thousands of different things, ranging from baptism water, honey for anointing things, or milk for purification. However, in this case, the priest meant his own sperm. He told the girl that he needed to put the love of God inside her and smear the holy ointment across the rash. If it didn't work, I presume he'd tell her to come back for more. Now, at this time, the priests were expected to have sex, and they sold the spin that it was a great honour and a guarantee for instant entry into heaven. This may well be such a crock, but there were many 1,000 innocent who would fall for it. Now, before she acceded to her priest's suggestion, a fly was about to land in the holy ointment. Robert Phillipson heard about Josephine's trouble and brought some leaves from the forest, pummeled them down in a mortar and pestle, and told her to smear them across the rash and cover it with a warm cloth. She did this, and the following morning, the rash was almost totally gone. Phillipson explained that he'd suffered similarly when he carried some flowers, probably an allergic reaction, so he knew what had worked for him to fix it. Josephine said that she had been placing flowers in her church for a spring festival. On hearing that he'd have to keep his ointment under his cassock, the priest was furious. "This is obviously the work of the devil." Both Robert and Josephine were arrested by the authorities and made to face charges. They were at the same assizes as proven witches Jane Bambarrow and Margaret Catherwood in Newcastle upon Tyne. And they were very lucky too, as both of those ladies were trialled by use of holy ointment. The court accepted that goose fat, blessed by the church, should be smeared on their heads, and if they were witches, they would scream and die. Both women screamed, but were both in perfect health. Finally, they both stood to their feet and just walked out. The judge said that God had intervened to save them, and both women had disappeared right in front of him. Well, they walked out the church. They left, not disappearing literally, and that's what it looks like when written in church archives. So when Robert and Josephine explained what the priest had said about his own personal ointment, the court and the public all laughed out loud. The case was dismissed, and his bishop slapped him across the head, dragging him out of the court. Now, it's rare that a single ghost can be witnessed in the same place by over 1,000 different people over a period of 480 years. Yet that is exactly what's happening in a house not far from Newcastle's West Road, in a terrace of houses close to the General Hospital. The haunting has continued as recently as January of this year. It led to investigation by the church and spiritualists, but it is at this point we notice a coincidence with our previous witch story. Back in the 1600s, just off the West Road was a stone-built house where a popular car wash now operates. It belonged to a merchant called Hugh St. John. St. John's Road nearby is named after him. Now, he was troubled with what he described as a demon he would be lying on his bed just about to wake up when he became conscious that he was not alone. He feared opening his eyes, for he had seen a dark shape in there before. This was a black, solid-looking figure standing over him, staring directly into his eyes. He would wake up and he would scream until it slowly disintegrated in front of him. Had he spoken out to the church at that time, they would have said he was possessed by the devil and could have had him hanged. Instead, he told only his closest friends, and 2 stayed at his manor house, both suffering the same exact phenomenon. They refused ever to go back, so as he lay there, wanting to get up, but knowing that that thing was there, he just lay there. Then he felt something climbing over his bed. He could feel it dipping down with something of human weight. He even felt his legs being physically climbed over. Then he could bear it no longer, and he opened his eyes. But before he had the chance to scream, the dark figure roared right into his face. It was so shocking that he passed out, and imagine how gingerly he opened his eyes coming out of that. St. John moved down to York, taking his business with him, and he never lived there again. These hauntings continued from around that time. St. John told Arthur Potts, the man who bought it, that he had sought help from a witch, yet on hearing her advice, he thought it unhelpful, so refused to pay her. Instead, his footman chased her from the hall with a leather strap. The witch had sent a demon to plague the hall for all eternity. Potts sold up within 7 months. It changed hands time and time again, until eventually the hall was broken up and streets built on part of it, shops on another. The problem was that all of the land on where it stood was, and still is, cursed. So the shopkeeper who slept above his emporium awoke to see a dark face screaming and refused to stay. The owner kept replacing his tenant time and time again. And on one occasion, 5 men from the town volunteered to stay awake to guard the owner to see what it was. And around 3:30 in the morning, a shape appeared through a wall. It was the figure of a tall, thick-set man with stooped shoulders. The shape completely ignored the watching eyes and took position, cowering over the sleeping figure. On occasions it would lean down, almost as if it was sniffing him. 2 of the men were so terrified they ran out screaming, but to their credit, the other 3 hung in there. Then, just as the sleeping man was about to awake, they all began shouting at him, "Don't open your eyes!" And at that moment, the figure turned towards them and roared. They were all knocked backwards into the wall, one of them dislocating his shoulder. The sleeping man was certainly wide awake now, and promptly had a heart attack and died as the black figure disappeared in front of him. Now, across the years, thousands have experienced this, or having felt the figure clamber over them.